Mass Effect has been my favorite all-time entertainment IP ever since Mass Effect 2 hit consoles way back when in 2010. It was a whole decade ago. Put quite simply, it blew my mind. Ever since then, I was hooked. I've always been more of an FPS gamer at my core and never really dove that deep into the RPG genre at the time. But never before have I experienced a game with the level of fidelity, exploration, character development, and kick-ass combat that Mass Effect 2 showcased and blended together ever so beautifully to make it as immersive and expansive experience as it was. Mass Effect 3 ultimately expanded on that blend, tightening everything up except for maybe that ending, depending on who you ask, though I still love the hell out of that game despite its misgivings. Throughout the entire length of the trilogy, this series was able to make you feel like a super soldier in the future, a biotic brick shithouse, or the leader that the galaxy needed, although not the one it deserved, depending on how far renegade you decided to go along the way. And that was all along with some of the most memorable characters that I would have ever been more than happy to share the crew with the Normandy with. It was just fucking awesome any way that you sliced it. You could be all of this amongst many other things and still hit the galactic nightclub whenever you felt like it. It was because of this that made me fall head over heels in love with this game that would eventually go down as one of the most beloved RPGs and stories in gaming. And it is because of all of this and my years-long love affair with this timeless, beautiful space opera of a game that I consider to be a piece of art that I'm going to tell you, to the best of my ability, what the rumored Mass Effect Trilogy Remaster needs to have in order to not only succeed, but to regain the trust and rapport that BioWare has spectacularly and famously lost with this once fiercely loyal community. Alright, I guess first of all, before we really start this off, it's worth mentioning that we still don't know for a fact if this remaster is coming to us or not. It technically isn't even confirmed yet, however, it is speculated, heavily speculated actually, and EA said that they have an HD remaster title in the pipe for us within the current fiscal year. Even with the rumor mill spun up faster than a mass relay, fans like myself have been asking for a remaster of this trilogy for years and years now. So the fact that this is now in the conversation in a really very, very real way, I think these are the things that the trilogy overall needs going forward. So take all this with the biggest grain of salt you think appropriate for the time being. And with that small caveat out of the way, let's get on to the first necessity of the video. Now, some of you may disagree with me on this and want the nostalgia-soaked trip down memory lane when it comes to Mass Effect 1, but may I remind you, these are my personal necessities for the trilogy. They may not line up directly with what you want for the game yourself. When I eventually went back and played Mass Effect 1 after I finished the second game to get the full effect of the trilogy, I painfully discovered that the controls and combat that I had become accustomed to in Mass Effect 3 did not age well in the mere 3 years that separated Mass Effect 1 and 2, and that still holds very true to this day. I'm of the belief that they need to go back and tune up the original's controls in a big way. BioWare successfully sells you on the idea of being a Spectre, the 1% of the 1% on a truly galactic scale, the presence of which is no greater than in the first game out of all 3 titles. Yet the controls in the first game most of all suffer from a feeling of almost laziness/cut corners. They feel unrefined and just loose compared to Mass Effect 2 and 3. This gripe has nothing to do with the game's overall unique flavor, such as the heat-based weaponry and the heavier focus on RPG elements. However, it does have to do with the feeling of how Shepard moves and controls overall as a character in what is otherwise a third-person action game. All of this, of course, does nothing to take away from the game's story, which I still find second to none to this day. The state of the game's core game mechanics reveal themselves to be a priority in the modern day. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get on to necessity number 2. This is an update/change/necessity that really should just be expected at this point. It's going to be a 2020/2021 remaster of a beloved trilogy. The graphics and overall visual fidelity need to be top-notch here. Anti-aliasing should be as high as it can, global illumination should basically be rebuilt from the ground up, and textures and assets need to look stunning. This isn't a port. It needs to be in the same vein as the Halo anniversary remasters, and you need to be able to tell the difference. This is one of the most beloved trilogies ever made in video games, and it deserves the respect that comes with that accolade. With that being said, 4K HDR at 60 frames per second is nothing new to the PC community, but those of us that played the trilogy on console never had the privilege of experiencing these games in such a quality. All three games, without a doubt, need to be overhauled to a stunning 4K resolution running at a rock-solid 60 frames with stunning HDR. It's a space opera with gorgeous worlds, characters, and set pieces. It would be a crime not to make this design choice going forward, especially if EA plans to put this trilogy on next-gen consoles, which they 100% should. Speaking of which, I really think that if this remaster is real, that it should only be put on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and PC. These are the only platforms with the real horsepower to handle what needs to be done with this series. No one's going to be able to change my mind on that. There really isn't a whole lot more to say on this necessity, but I think I speak for the entire Mass Effect community when I say that it's about time for us to be downright visually spoiled. We've waited long enough as a fanbase and put up with EA giving us Andromeda half-baked, and that's putting it lightly. I want to see my favorite game series running on the new consoles in stunning 4K at 60 FPS. There is literally zero room for compromise here. Now, I'm not a game developer or a software engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but we're living in 2020 with new consoles on the horizon that will have flash storage built into them that run literally 100 times faster than their previous generation counterparts. I don't see any excuse for not making this a reality. Alright, that may seem a little heated, but I just wanted to get that out of the way before my next necessity. The Mass Effect series is home to some of the finest pieces of downloadable content that I have the fond memory of looking back on within my 20-plus year gaming career. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but I'm really 100% serious on that topic. Just for a quick trip down memory lane, the two that stick out at me the most are Lair the Shadow Broker and Citadel. I still look back on these two pieces of DLC ever so fondly to this day. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then I implore you to just wait for the trilogy to be released in all of its HD glory and play it for the first time for yourself. You will not be sorry. Also, a quick side note to this necessity that I wanted to include is that the extended versions of each ending should just be included into the main story as well, and play out by default when you choose whatever ending you end up choosing. I think that it's the only quote-unquote fixing that some of you may be hoping for when it comes to the ending of this trilogy. Now, on the topic of DLC for these games, it's worth mentioning that BioWare released a plethora of DLC for the multiplayer component of Mass Effect 3, which we'll get to a bit later, I promise. And a bunch of different armor sets, squad skins, weapons, weapon skins, weapon parts, vehicle skins, locations, upgrades, missions, cosmetics for your captain's quarters. I think there was an interactive comic at one point for Mass Effect 2. There was just a bunch of shit that, and some of it may have been small, but there was a lot. In fact, there was so much stuff that some of it bordered on the level of microtransaction than actual full-blown DLC pack in the sense that most of us are accustomed to today. But as we all know, the industry has gone the route of more microtransactions than full-blown DLC packs / expansions anyway, especially when it comes to EA, so that's just something to take note of. But my point is that there was a lot of extra stuff for this game that, while not essential to the gameplay or story or anything like that, it would just be really nice to have in a full, complete $60 package. EA should absolutely do the right thing and include all of this in an HD Trilogy remaster and not take the route of Activision and charge extra money for a map pack that most of us paid for all the way back in 2007 or 8. I'm looking at you, Modern Warfare Remastered. If they don't bring back all the DLC for all three games, it'll be a crime and a slap in the face to the community. With all this being said, I truly don't think that EA would be thick-headed enough to make that mistake, but I just wanted to put it on the list anyway. Alright, let's move on to necessity number 4. Alright. I know my very first thing on the list was to tighten up the controls in Mass Effect 1 and make some much needed quality of life improvements to the first game overall to help it hang in 2020. But so very little needs to actually be done to Mass Effect 2 and 3 from a gameplay and mechanic perspective. I know I might catch some shit for this next one, but I really don't care. I even enjoyed probing the planets for resources mechanic. I thought it was kind of relaxing. You would just go on a mission, come back, need to upgrade a weapon or two, go to the galactic map, go to a planet, maybe probe some planets. You would just sit there, put some inputs on the controller, and that would be it. It was kind of a laid-back experience from the intensity of the mission-to-mission action, and I don't know, I just kind of appreciated it at the end of the day. The overall gameplay was so much fun in Mass Effect 2 and 3 that I really don't think they need to screw with it too much. Make all the necessary changes to the visuals to bring the games up to speed with today's standards and whatever quality of life improvements they might need along the way. But I really, really think they should just leave the rest alone. I want this trilogy how I remember it. Jaw-dropping and fun as all hell. Just translate that to modern day standards and I'll be more than happy. And EA, whatever you do, leave this narrative alone. If there is one thing that you should take away from this video, is that the story should be exactly how it was left, except for maybe those extended cut endings. Do not touch the story. That means all the dialogue choices, all the major story beats, the characters, the major decisions, the Paragon/Renegade moments, or the turning points, everything like that, it all has to stay. That's what made Mass Effect Mass Effect. You would think this would have been a pretty no-brainer necessity to put on this list, but this is a major publisher and a major AAA studio that we're talking about, and it needs to be put out there in the universe. So I put it on the list to make a point. It is the only real point to make with Mass Effect, is to leave the story the fuck alone. So with that, let's move on to necessity number 5. See? Told you we got to the multiplayer component of Mass Effect 3. This was such a fun break from the super serious story that was the conclusion to the Mass Effect trilogy. The multiplayer in 3 was just a better than average hard mode that pitted you and your buddies against waves and waves of increasingly hard enemies from different factions on a number of different maps with different enemies, all while contributing to your effective readiness level for the campaign in your effort against the Reapers. It was just awesome, and it was a great time killer. And the fact that it helped you in certain aspects of the story to get 100% combat readiness towards your army fighting the Reapers in the single-player campaign, that really was just icing on the cake and the cherry on top. It was just, I loved it. However, as fun as I think the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer component was, here's what I think has to change come the 2020 or 2021 remaster of this game. Alright, so the multiplayer in Mass Effect 3 needs to have a much more fleshed out progression system. There was a progression system in the original game, however, it leaned way too heavily on the crutch of a loot-based loot box system. And the fact that you needed to earn credits from playing the game for hours and hours on end in order to buy increased rarity of loot boxes, it was just gross and obnoxious, and it didn't respect your time as the player in the slightest. And you were expected to grind away forever to get enough credits to buy the highest tier loot crate. That way you can get a chance at the items that you needed. It was bad. There were several different weapons that had a respectable level of variety to them, but the weapons operated on a rarity level that dictated how powerful they were. It went from bronze to platinum, I think. Don't quote me on that one, but the main way to get the weapons were, you wanted to get the rarest ones, but they were in the rarest loot boxes, so you had to play forever to get enough credits to buy the rarest loot box in every aspect of the multiplayer mode. There was a lot of shit to this multiplayer component. There were characters, weapons, armor, abilities, single-use consumables, upgraded characters, etc. On top of all that, EA pushed their microtransactions in the Xbox and PlayStation Store for little things like weapons, and the big packs, they would add whole new characters in them with a host of new abilities and animations. Granted, I didn't mind paying for those character bundles at the time, since the value of a new character model, abilities, animations, sometimes all new weapon sets and damage profiles seemed worthwhile, especially when I played the game as much as I did. That being said, loot boxes aren't loved now, and they sure as hell weren't loved back then. The mere existence of a loot box system essentially took away any form of targeted grinding for what you may have wanted when it came to a piece of gear or a weapon. And there was a lot to go after in this game. Which is why the randomness of the gear system needs to be straight up changed for a fully fleshed out progression system with a model that lets you go after the dozens upon dozens of items to earn in-game. I think they should keep the old way of ranking the weapons, i.e. bronze through platinum. Again, I think that's the way it was, but don't 100% quote me on that one. But we need a better way to earn them, whether that be a comprehensive challenge for weapons or just level them up and you'll get what you're after for the playtime that you put in. Because ultimately, that's the thing. I don't mind if I have to play a lot. If I know I'm going to get what I want once I get there, I'll put the time in. But I'm not going to end up paying for the same shit that I paid for when Mass Effect 3 was in its heyday. It's just not going to happen. Sorry, EA. You owe us enough with this remaster. So those are pretty much my 5 key, absolute non-negotiable necessities for the Mass Effect HD Remastered Trilogy. We need improved controls and an overall tighter experience for Mass Effect 1. We need 4K HDR at 60 FPS, and I would like next-gen exclusivity. We need all DLC for all games included, no extra charge. We need not for them to tweak shit for any of the 3 games too much, more so Mass Effect 2 and 3 than Mass Effect 1. And lastly, we need a more refined multiplayer experience for Mass Effect 3, even though it's just PvE. So now that we've reached the end of my necessity list for the alleged Mass Effect HD Trilogy Remaster, there might be some stuff on here that some of you guys might not agree with, or who knows, maybe I nailed it and everything in here is the only thing that needs to change once the collection hits the market again. I'm sure the comment section on YouTube will let me know. For what it's worth, I truly hope and pray to the gaming gods that this remaster is for real and that we'll see it within a year or so of this video going up, or at least it gets announced soon for all I care. Because honestly, I can wait. We've all waited long enough for this. Just get it right. For the love of God, get it right. Because at the end of the day, my number one hope is that they do actually get it right. If they release an HD Remastered Trilogy in the same state that they released Andromeda, or dare I say it, Anthem, then that might be it. And yeah, I bought Anthem at full price. We all need to make fun of ourselves occasionally, right? Not one of my finer moments. That will, I repeat, will be the final nail in the coffin after Anthem and a botched Mass Effect remaster. BioWare will probably be done for good, and EA will just dissolve the talent into other studios, which would be a true and utter shame. BioWare has been my favorite gaming studio for a long time. They've hit a bumpy path so far, but they've been spectacular pretty much up to now. But that's pretty much all I got. Let me know if you liked the video. Leave a comment if you like it, or if you didn't, then don't. I just want to get my thoughts out there in the universe for my favorite game series ever. Alright, see you in the next one.